The next panel will be led by Dr. Scott Gabree. He is an engineering psychologist with the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center. Scott joined the Volpe Center in 2009 and is currently the manager of the research program for grade crossing safety and trespass prevention for the Surface Transportation Human Factors Division. He has been a popular and frequent guest at the DuPage Railroad Safety Council conferences and joins us today as the panel moderator for panel number 2, which is What's Working on Commuter Rail. We will begin that as soon as Scott shows up. Scott Gabree, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Lanny. I appreciate that, and I'm lucky to have the privilege to both be here with this great conference today and also to be moderating a phenomenal panel of people. We've got a variety of different perspectives, people who have share a lot of similarities, but I think bring unique perspectives to this really challenging issue of how to prevent tragedies on rail systems, whether it's trespass or suicide or crossing incidents. Commuter rails are facing that in a variety of different ways, and I think making some incredible strides to bring those numbers down and improve safety. So today we have several people from east to west. We've got a nice geographic spread here. So Deidre in New York, Victor in Florida, Hilary from the Chicagoland area, and then finally we'll close it out with Tasha from out in the Bay Area of California. I won't spend a lot of time introducing everybody now because I'll do that for each individual person. So a quick reminder, I think as I've seen a lot of great action in the Q&A part, but if there are any questions that anyone has as this comes up, please put them into the Q&A. And I think everyone here is going to do their best to make sure that we address as many of those as we can at the end of this session. But so without further adu, to get to the reason why you were all here, I'll start off by introducing the first panelist, who is Deidre Mitchell from Metro North. Deidre is someone who I've gotten to know, at least over the phone, quite a bit over the last couple years, as I've been talking with different rail carriers who are doing some great work, and Deidre is definitely one of those individuals. So Deidre Mitchell is the Safety Education Program Coordinator in the Office of System Safety at Metro North Railroad. She oversees Metro North's safety education and community outreach program called TRACS, which stands for Together Railroads and Communities Keeping Safe. And her commitment and passion for railroad safety, tied with mental health awareness and suicide prevention, has allowed her to facilitate the implementation of new safety programs and educate many in the Metro North communities. So please take it away, Deidre.
Thank you, Scott, so much for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you to the DuPage Rail Safety Council for having me here today as well. So like Scott mentioned, I work at Metro North Railroad over here in New York. I run our safety education program, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we're doing over here at Metro North to combat trespassers and suicide prevention. Just a little quick background about Metro North in case you don't know. We cover over 2,700 square miles of territory in both New York and Connecticut throughout 9 counties. We have 802 miles of track. We have 103 grade crossings and 124 stations. So just a little overview of our system. Next slide, please. So this is our TRACS program. So for suicide and trespass prevention, we really focus on educating our communities and our employees, everywhere in between the Metro North system. So TRACS is our free program. It stands for Together Railroads and Communities Keeping Safe. We focus on rail safety education and community outreach to promote safe behaviors at railroad grade crossings, at our stations, and anywhere near our train tracks. Like I said, it's a free program. We began this program in May of 2016. We partner with the MTA Police Department. So whenever we go out to events or grade crossings and we do safety blitzes, outreach, we have them with us typically to help reinforce those safe behaviors. Our mission is to educate as many drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and individuals that live and or work in the communities that Metro North serves. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the program elements that we focus on through tracks, two that I'm going to focus on here today is trespass prevention and suicide prevention. We also cover grade crossing safety in depth, pedestrian safety, passenger safety, gap safety, the ENS sign, bridge plate safety, emergency preparedness. And just recently we started focusing on COVID-19 safety, so health safety, face masks, hygienes, and all of that good stuff. Next slide, please. So the tracks program methods, there's really two main ones. This first one up here on the screen is our rail safety presentations. So we partner with Operation Lifesaver also. A lot of our rail safety material comes from them. We run all of our materials by them, get approval from them to show in our programs. We go to schools. I go to schools a lot, and we conduct these rail safety presentations. With COVID-19, it's been a little bit challenging for us to get to schools, so we switched over to virtual presentations. We've been doing them online. We offered these presentations to all ages, so not just schools. We go to community groups. Anywhere that requests the presentations, we're happy to come in and do them and help educate our communities. We have some more innovative elements on the screen. There's a picture of our tracks ambassador, Metro Man. He's our rail safety superhero that we use. We like to bring him to local community events and schools to get the younger populations a little more engaged and excited about being safe around trains and tracks. Next slide, please. The other method that we focus on is community outreach. So this one is often supported by the MTA PD. We'll go out to grade crossings, hand out brochures. There's some examples, some photos on the screen here. Get that information out to all of our communities, all the individuals, whether they're driving, whether we're at stations handing out information. We do a ton of outreach sessions. We also set up tables at local and community events. We go to a lot typically throughout the year. So, you know, we can really interface with the communities that we serve and get this information out there. Once again, COVID-19 kind of put a pause on all of that. So we've been really focusing on social media and digital campaigns. During Rail Safety Week in September, we recently released some new safety videos of featuring Metro Man. So we put those out there for all of our social media platforms. So it's really getting the word out to mass crowds, which we found very, very successful. On the screen now is our tracks goals. So since the program began in 2016, we had a goal to reach 50,000 people within our territory. We exceeded that goal and reached slightly over 50,000. And as you can see, each year we increase the goal for the number of people we want to reach and educate in our communities. And we've exceeded it every year. So we've been pretty successful. Although this year, 2020, originally our goal was to reach 110,000 people. Unfortunately, we had to relook at that, and we've changed it for 45,000 people, which we've already exceeded, and we've been really successful through those social media and digital campaigns. So slight change this year, but we're working on it. Next slide, please. So for suicide prevention, we've actually worked with Metra in Chicago over there. Hilary was a huge help for us. He came out with one of his trainers, and they helped us build this program from the ground up and implement this program here at Metro North. So we implemented the QPR Gatekeeper Training for suicide prevention. So QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. The evidence-based best practice and the 3 simple steps that anyone can learn to potentially help save a life, prevent a suicide, or help somebody get the help that they need. It's a great program, and we are so thankful and grateful for Hilary and all of his work to help us get it over here and started at Metro North. Next slide, please. So we launched our program in March of 2019. Like as I mentioned, we adapted this from Metra and Hilary over there. We started this training and rolled it out to our customer service employees, so those front-facing employees. We adapted 2-hour training sessions, and myself and one other employee have become certified QPR Gatekeeper instructors, so we actually administer the trainings. In September of 2019, in alignment with National Suicide Prevention Month, we opened up the training to all employees and have since kept it that way. Since then, we've trained slightly over 500 of our employees out of the 6,500 of our workforce, but we're getting there. COVID also put a pause on that too, but we're working our way to virtually train these programs again. I'd say this program has been successful just based on all of the positive feedback that we've gotten from our employees through the course evaluations. We encourage our employees anytime that they use QPR, whether they're using the emergency procedures we teach them, or if they actually intervene that one-on-one conversation, to report that to us so that we can kind of collect that information, see if they're using it. Unfortunately, we've only had one direct report of an intervention. However, we've seen over 1,000 trespasser reports. So times that our employees have called in for trespasser sightings. So we realize that our employees are definitely being more vigilant, looking out for people who might be, suspicious. They might think something's going on. So they're definitely reporting it, and they're definitely looking out for that. Next slide, please. And this is just a photo of some of our first classes. We give them certificates, and you can see all the lovely smiles on their faces for taking this training. Next slide. So another thing that we do here at Metro North to focus on suicide prevention is we partner with local or community groups that focus on suicide prevention specifically. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the Crisis Text Line, and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP. Next slide, please. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, we typically do a poster campaign every year. It's a 24/7 free and confidential support for anyone in crisis. We post these up all along our stations, in our digital monitors, physically also in our station kiosks, so that people who see these can directly get those resources to them. Next slide. Similar to the Lifeline, the Crisis Text Line, we established a partnership in April of 2019. We have a unique keyword for our territory, which we developed as Next to You. So it's a 24/7 free confidential support for people in distress, but it's all via text. So for the millennials like myself who hate talking on the phone, we can do this all via text and get the support and help that we need. Since April of 2019, we've had a total of 38 conversations. We're able to get that data through our partnership. And once we hit 200 conversations, we're actually able to find out a little more about what people are talking about, so the challenges that they're facing, so that we can better support those communities. Next slide. These are just some of the new ones that we've developed specific to COVID-19 and the anxieties that our customers, our communities are facing. Next slide. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP. So we established this partnership in 2018. They have a bunch of local community Out of the Darkness walks, which are fundraising events. All donations go to them for research and to create educational programs. We at Metro North, we go to at least 4 throughout Connecticut and New York each year to table. We also create a team, a tracks team. We register and we encourage Metro North employees to sign up, come to the walks, and fundraise on their own if they so choose to. And that's a picture of our team from 2019. Next slide, please. And so just to kind of go over the trespassing metrics here at Metro North, I'm going to go over the strikes, the injuries, and the incidents, just to kind of give you an overview. I have 2015 as the baseline here because that's pre the TRACS program and all these efforts that we've put into place that I mentioned. So as you can see, the trespasser strikes, we have a steady decrease from 2015 for that comparison each year, with slight fluctuation year over year. So, we're pretty much staying steady, but the goal here is to reduce all these numbers to 0 and keep it that way. Next slide. Injuries, same thing. These numbers are very similar year to year. We have a predominant decline from 2015, the comparison, but again, some more fluctuations the year over year. But again, the goal is to reduce these all to zero. And then finally, the incidents. So this includes the strikes, the injuries, and everything in between. So anytime a trespasser is spotted, any incident that has anything to do with trespassers is included in this data. These are the raw numbers. So you know, it's real, it's happening, it's here at Metro North. And the reason why we do these programs and we put these things into place is to kind of, again, reduce these to the best of our ability. And we really want to see a downward trend. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deidre. That was fantastic. And I'm sure we'll see you again once the rest of these presentations are over and we can get to the Q&A period. But thanks for sharing all that great insight. Our next panelist that we're going to go to will take a trip south from New York City, and I'll introduce Victor Garcia. Victor is the Corporate and Community Outreach Manager and PIO for the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, or Tri-Rail. In his current role, he's responsible for communicating with the media, supervising the marketing, public relations, and advertising services contract, managing the corporate and community outreach office staff, as well as the agency's customer service call center. So thank you very much for joining us today, Victor. I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me today. It's funny you say that, coming from New York to the South. That's actually how I got here to South Florida myself. So, and a little trivia. There's a slight connection between. I've never met Deidre before, but her former boss is also my former boss, Joe Giletti, who's now in Connecticut as the, I believe, Commissioner of Transportation. So thank you all for having me. I was very excited to share with you some of the information, some of the things that we have done to prevent trespassers as well as suicides on our rails today. However, I lost a little of my pep due to the fact that I was woken up this morning with the dreaded call that we once again have struck a trespasser, confirmed fatality this morning. So you know, it's obviously something that we have to continue to do our best to try to minimize. It's going to be an ongoing issue for as long as we know. It takes a lot of effort and not always, you know, providing the greatest results. But the fact of the matter is that we're going to continue to find ways how to mitigate this these issues, and conferences like these are just priceless, because here we can learn so many different things of how we can go ahead and proceed to think of new ways and to see what our peers are doing. And but yes, so my apologies for that, as well as if you hear any noises from the background. I do have a beagle who's prone to howling just for attention. So next slide, please. We'll share, as we've seen some of this in the previous presenters' slides already. Yeah, Florida has been consistently in the top of these charts, not ones that we are proud of. But yeah, according to FRA's safety statistics, between 2015 and 2020, Florida is ranked third highest among the top 15 states for the number of railway trespassing casualties in the nation. So as a result, an emphasis on suicide prevention needs to continue and will require targeted and novel outreach and training strategies to mitigate railroad suicides. For us, there are several confounding elements which we believe relate to trespass violations. In our case, the location by our tracks that we have to nearby sober homes and homeless camps, as well as high schools. To this point, thousands of people living or engaging in activities near the railroad tracks are potential violators and therefore in grave danger of the related consequences of railway trespassing. In some instances, we believe the community may not even be aware of the Florida state statute, which governs trespassing, the legal consequences of trespassing, and the dangers of it. To these points, we propose to utilize signage in and around the railways as an effort to increase public awareness and likewise decrease trespassing violations. Next slide, please. So South Florida is the 5th largest urbanized area in the United States with more than 5 million residents. I shared some of this already, but basically between 2010 and 2017, it's estimated that the population of South Florida grew from nearly 5.6 million to 6 million. The South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, who I'm representing, we operate tri-rail trains, known and named Tri-Rail because we cover the 3 counties of Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. I'm sharing the numbers just so you see the type of growth that it is that we experience here in Florida. Slowed down a few years back when during housing crisis and such, but that's what we're normally used to seeing in Florida, is just continual growth. And we expect to see more of that, more folks from out of town coming here, not knowing the lay of the land and having to familiarize themselves with the type of services that we have. Our trains operate a 73.4 mile stretch of rail that we cover 18 train stations, over a dozen municipalities with 72 rail crossings. Now all of them have gates, all of them have warning gates and such, but some of them, we were lucky that some of them run through a lot of industrial areas, but we do traverse a few communities, and that's where we run into a lot of issues in some cases. So SFRTA, we are a Tri-County Public Transit Authority serving these 3 counties. The segment of the corridor also we share with Amtrak as well as CSX Class 1 freight that operates in Eastern United States. So we have, besides our trains, we have additional activities in our corridor. And that's just a little to share with you all. But thank you. Great. I'll keep. So yeah. So these are obviously these are the horrible stats. The 2020 numbers would have to be updated as of now. But just quickly, by looking at how we collect the incident reports, you'll notice that 2016-17, that's where you see some of the spike. And we noticed that in 2017, we had an increased incident of opioid addictions in this area. Repeatedly over time, the use of opioids slows the production of endorphins and ultimately can stop people from having the ability to feel good. With a direct proximity of rehab facilities, as I mentioned, we documented a higher than number of trespass deaths on the corridor located in a specific area, or actually in specific areas, communities around the corridor. And as a result, we had to come up with a way to provide public service announcements, released whether by social media and with the in conjunction with an organization that I'll share a little bit more in a slide coming up. But go ahead, next slide, please. So to share some of the effective results that we've, I want to share a couple of good incidents. These are our safety security director likes to mention, because it kind of shows some good examples of what things that have worked for us. And here's just an incident in 2019. We experienced 5 incursions at this particular crossing, which the picture on the bottom right is where that's located, 6th Avenue, that resulted in 2 vehicles being struck by a train. So in December 2019. So between January and March of this year, we experienced 5 more incursions at the same crossroads. Road delineators, if you can see on the pictures, were installed in April, and since then we've had no issues. So that's just one simple thing that as we mentioned in some of the presentation before, some of the things that you put in place that make a difference. That, as simple as it seems, we do have 72 corridor crossings. It does require some funding to figure out how to do this, but there's something as simple as that where we've had and still experience cars just turning onto our tracks because they don't realize that that's not a street. So we like these, and we're looking at incorporating more of this in the near future. Also in 2019, we partnered with the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office Lake Worth Division to support their trespassing efforts. Oh, if you can go just back to the previous slide. Thank you. During a time of enforcement that this is probably one of his proudest, is that basically what our director likes would feel would be the best thing to help curb this issue would be having live folks on our tracks, being able to be there to monitor the tracks, to try to see if they notice anything. And we actually received a small pilot grant to be able to do this in a 6-month effort that ended in December, during which time we had no incidents on our tracks. So again, one of the things that we would like to see if we could possibly do in the future is just that the cost is much too high. Again, we cover such a vast area, but a live presence at our on the corridor would definitely be at least from what we've seen, one of the most effective ways for us to be able to do this. So next slide, please. So yes, it's all about partnerships, and we have to thank our partners at the Florida Department of Transportation. Obviously, we're just in South Florida. They cover a vast state, that has a lot of large cities and a lot of rail going through it. So thanks to them, we've been able to do a lot of the things that we have done and that we will do. Here's a few examples of something that we did 2 years ago with FDOT's cooperation. We were able to install these signs along the corridor with the partnership of 211. I don't know if you're all aware, or I'm sure you have your own type of organization. 211, they specialize in helping people who are thinking of suicide. It's a free number that you just call. Someone picks up and can help you 24 hours a day. So we're able to put these signs along a corridor, hoping that as people are, walking the tracks and possibly thinking that they might see these and see that there is somebody that can help them. So that was a couple of years ago. Last year, we teamed up with them again, and we made it a on board the train signage. And they created the posters that you'll see in the middle of the screen, targeting to some of the demographics who they've been experiencing more suicide issues, like members of the LGBT community, veterans, and such. There were a few more posters. I just showed a couple for this purpose. But that partnership has been invaluable. Working with folks who know how to deal with this, having that access to know where to guide folks and know how to message what we're doing has been great for us. And I definitely recommend that you work with your local organizations or regional ones. And we've also partnered with Brightline. As you all know, Brightline, the new kid in town, they've gotten some national headlines by some of the issues that they had when they were running. They're suspended now due to COVID. So they've, I mean, somewhat unfairly, because obviously they're new. It's a new community. They're serving a lot more urban areas than we are, where it's a lot more centered, a lot more density in those areas. So we've worked together with them to get the message out, to let folks know about the dangers of railroads. And we hope to continue that if and when they decide to come back as well. So along with that, we do partnerships with our advertising agency. Has been able to get us a partnership with local channels where we can do public service announcements. We've thanks to social media now, we have our YouTube page where we're able to post a lot of the videos that we put together and continue to share whenever we want to put the message out. So next slide. And this is how we continue. This year we actually have been lucky enough to have been awarded a grant to pursue additional safety measures, including a $200,000 2-year outreach grant that we've already started putting in place. We started it off this year with Rail Safety Week and putting messages out. As you all know, with COVID, most outreach has been suspended, at least here in South Florida. So we took advantage of the situation. It just happened to come at the right time, since normally what we do is we take the week and we do a safety blitz where we hand out flyers to the public. Without having the ability to do that this year, as we had most people working from home, we were able to use some funds from the grant to be able to make it a week-long, basically advertisement campaign. With you'll see some of the graphics below. That was a video that we shot, and we were able to promote during that week. So and that was just one of the things that we have 2 years to use $200,000. So we have a few other things in place that we plan to do. So that's going to be a big help as we clear ourselves out of the coronavirus, to be able to do more advertisement. And get that message out in different things. Now, it's not only, that's just the outreach component. We did also receive some support to do some additional work, which is enhanced fencing, add more delineators and pavement markings. We're actually looking at a new camera system design and LED warning signage and gate skirts that'll help alert people when they are at, when they're nearby or in the danger zone per se. But in addition to that, we continue to get support from FDOT to post to messages and things of that nature. So so those are some of the things that's it for me for today. I appreciate, again, the time for being here, and I'll hang out for some questions.
Thank you so much, Victor. I appreciate it. And the terrible news you got this morning only highlights, as you said, why we're here today and why you're doing the great work you're doing and why this group exists. So thank you for sharing everything today. And we'll hopefully have some time for questions at the end to continue this. Sure. We'll turn now to Hilary Konczal, who I'm sure many people on the call know well, and is probably the first name that comes to my mind when I'm looking to chat with someone about railroad safety and trespass and suicide prevention, both because he's fun to talk to and because he knows what he's doing, and he's very, very good at this. So with that, I'll introduce Hilary Konczal, who's the Chief Safety and Environmental Officer at Metra, has 29 years of railroad safety and operations experience. He's responsible for Metra's overall safety programs, initiatives, and prevention activities, including trespass and suicide prevention strategies, which we're discussing today. So with that, please take it away, Hilary.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate your introduction, and also I'd like to thank Dr. Lanny Wilson and the DuPage Rail Safety Council for the work that they do to ensuring and improving rail safety throughout the region, and actually now throughout the country, as their symposium has gone nationwide. So And I'd also like to thank them for the opportunity to allow us to share our experience and our best practices with everybody involved. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick overview of our the Metra system, it's a very large, complex system. We provide service, or pre-COVID, we provided service to approximately 288,000 passengers a day. We have 11 rail lines, 242 stations. If you see here, we have 565 grade crossings, which is obviously a challenge when preventing or trying to prevent incidents at grade crossings. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges we face with preventing trespasser incidents and fatalities are obviously being an open system and a large system, you know, in a highly urban populated area such as the city of Chicago, or the Chicago region, I should say. Our goal is to prevent rail incidents and fatalities, and I'll discuss our prevention strategies throughout the presentation. One strategy I wanted to discuss is learning where our hotspots are. It's a very important initiative to identify and learn about where your trespassing is occurring on your line and where your near misses are occurring on your line. So for example, with our near miss system, this form you'll see here, when an engineer comes across a trespasser along the railroad right away, or they have to put the train into emergency because a passenger or a pedestrian runs in front of the train, they'll immediately notify our dispatcher. The dispatcher will notify our Metra police, who will then in turn obviously dispatch somebody to the area to see if they could locate the trespasser, but then they'll follow it up with this near miss report. And the near miss report comes in handy because it's sent to the safety department, and we you know, go through it. We log all the data and the information, and in addition to that, we pull the video from the head end of the locomotive, and we also pull the download to see how fast the train was going, was the bell and whistle on, and those sort of things. And then we use this information to identify trends. We use it for, obviously, to see if we could implement future engineering activities for prevention of trespasser incidents, or we will implement a Operation Lifesaver education safety blitz. In addition to, you know, depending upon the severity, if it's numerous people that are trespassing, what we'll do is we'll have our Metra police prepare or conduct an enforcement campaign. Next slide. As Director Rodney Craig, Mayor Rodney Craig stated, we do have our public outreach education, train safety education program. Pre-COVID, like Deidre was saying, it's a challenge to get into schools with everybody, you know, involved in e-learning. However, you know, pre-COVID, we were instrumental in driver's ed, high school driver's ed programs, preschool schools. So we're trying to switch over to e-learning using the Zoom platform, which is what many of the schools in the Chicagoland region are using. However, they're so far behind in their curriculum, we're having a tough time getting involved or getting back in there. However, we are getting some luck with some pre-K and kindergarten classes. You know, we also do a lot of community events promoting rail safety, which is, you know, extremely beneficial. We do school bus drivers. The one thing that we have been able to do is increase our Metra station safety blitzes. So what we do is we go out to the stations, we talk to the passengers about railroad safety. We hand them a, you know, pamphlet with railroad safety, you know, tips on it. And then we provided them, now we're providing them with hand sanitizer. So it's kind of an incentive to get them to stop and talk to us rather than having, you know, what we used to do is hand them a pen or, you know, a keychain flashlight or that sort of thing. So they're very receptive to that. We do take precautions when we are out. If you see in the picture, we're all wearing gloves. We wear our masks and make sure that the passengers are comfortable taking the supplies from us. Next slide, please. So, you know, trespassing events are one challenge that we face on a daily basis. However, our mental health awareness or suicides is, you know, we've looked at are another emerging trend. Back in 2017, we held our first mental health awareness program or symposium titled "Breaking the Silence," and it was an event that our chairman of the board at the time, Norm Carlson, was instrumental in making sure that we went out and we brought this emerging trend to the public, and not only to the public, but all our railroad partners, faith-based groups, the media, and to look at ways to address this problem as a community, not as a railroad problem. So that was the start of our involvement into, you know, suicide prevention or mental health awareness. We've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of research. I've went to a lot of different mental health organizations looking at ways to prevent incidents and suicides, and that's how we came across with the QPR program that I'll discuss a little bit later that Deidre had shared as well. Next slide, please. So as we stated, or as Lanny stated, the DuPage Rail Safety Council conducts their biannual conferences, and we agreed, Metra is a very strong partner with the DuPage Rail Safety Council. We agreed to switch off every other year, so we will hold our conference next year. But this was the conference that we held in 2019, last year, and we titled it "Restoring Hope, Saving Lives," because now that we, you know, the first conference was to, you know, bring the awareness to our stakeholders and partners, and this conference was kind of to share best practices and see what other railroads are doing. We had it was actually an international event. It was phenomenal. We had the British Transport Police come in from the UK, Toronto Transit presented from Canada, you know, the FRA, we had Operation Lifesaver present, and it really gave us a lot of opportunities to share. Well, first to learn that we're all facing similar problems, but also to share in the best practices that other agencies have implemented, and what works, what doesn't work. And we were also able to live stream this event, which allowed us to reach a larger audience. So this was a successful event, but I have to say the most inspiring part of this event was a young woman that we so happened to get to know. Her name was Amanda Keys, and she agreed. She struggled with mental health and suicide for years, and she shared her experience and her story, and with everything that she's gone through, she provided, you know, not only us with, you know, a lot of education on what somebody goes through who's struggling with mental health and suicide, but also hope that, you know, just because somebody is struggling with mental health issues or suicide, it's temporary, and you can overcome those, you know, those challenges. You know, and she's happy today. She's healthy. She still experiences, you know, some issues, but she is a functioning adult. She's married. She has a child, and it was so inspiring that I think that was probably the best I guess presenter that we had for that symposium. Next slide. So as Deidre spoke on the QPR mental health training, I'll just go over this slide quickly, but this is one of the handouts that we provide our employees when we're providing the class, so they can, it's like a wallet card, so they can refer to some of the, signs that, they may need to look for in a person that is suicidal or having anxiety or is troubled. If they see somebody along the right of way, parked in a vehicle as their train goes by numerous times, that would be a sign to intervene or call, our Metra Police Department. And this program has been extremely successful. And I'll go over those statistics a little later. Next slide. So part of the 2017 Breaking the Silence program or symposium, we came away with developing signage. We had a lot of discussion. We knew we were going to partner with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. However, as we were developing the signage, Bob Johnson from Trains Magazine had, mentioned about Crisis Text Line, which is used for the San Francisco Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, for people that want to commit suicide out there. So, and Caltrain was using the Crisis Text Line. So I contacted them because I thought, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a phenomenal resource for somebody who's troubled or needs assistance. However, I have, we have to think about the millennials. So I have a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, and they do not like to talk on the phone. They'll text, I'll be upstairs and I'll call them and they'll text me back and go, what do you want? So we wanted to implement an option for millennials as well, which is the Crisis Text Line, which has been extremely useful, especially now with COVID, as Deidre had said, and just anything. And to date, since this was implemented in 2017, we've had 119 conversations with our passengers with Crisis Text Line. And the interesting thing is that Deidre has or Metro North has a different tagline. Ours is "I got you." That tagline is specific to the railroad. So it allows us to track the number of contacts or conversations. With the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, we're not able to track the number of calls to that network because they don't use, the cell phones aren't pinged off of cell towers. They're still using area codes, so it's very hard to get data from the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. But the Crisis Text Line, we are able to get data from. Next slide. So the interactive mapping, this is a new initiative that we're doing. So we began mapping all of our incidents, our fatalities, near misses, and that sort of thing. So this is another tool where we're still fine-tuning it. We're working with our strategic capital planning department, but they've been extremely a huge resource for us with being able to map our incidents. We'll be able to pull them up on a map and kind of look at trends on a specific line, or if there's, right now we're working with them to look at near misses, and and that helps us identify, if they're near school or within, a quarter mile to, anything that, for example, we've been able to identify shortcuts that people have taken. So this has been extremely instrumental for us, and hopefully we'll have more information next time. Next slide. And then the one thing I did want to share, so as I stated earlier, these are our statistics since 2017. I think it's important to, know where we've been to know where we're going. You have to identify, your trends and to know what kind of mitigation steps to put in place. As Steve alluded earlier, the FRA, we're required to report a suicide only if the coroner deems it a suicide. However, there are a lot of instances where we know it's a suicide, but the coroners come back with their determination and they'll deem it, manner of death due to blunt force trauma because of a train strike. So that doesn't really help us as a transit agency who's trying to prevent future incidents based on, trespassers or suicide. So we put them in two buckets: a trespasser incident or a suicide, or a suspected suicide is what we call them. And you can see we've actually implemented our mental health awareness programs to combat or mitigate some of the suicides. And at the top, you'll see the suicide interventions from 2017 all the way through 2020. Now, in 2017, we had 50 interventions. 2018, we had 62. And you've seen now 2019 we had a reduction in interventions, but then this year 2020 you see kind of an increase because these are to date. Just so I might add, they're not a full year, they're to date up to October 5th. But while they're decreased, you'll see at the bottom, our fatalities are down 47%. And as Steve went through the fatalities and the grade crossing incidents for the different states and included the state of Illinois. And while the state of Illinois is, their events are not being reduced as much as other states within the region, or within the United States, I should say. Metra's, our fatalities are down 47%. And I honestly believe that this is due to our suicide prevention program, because now we are applying the appropriate resources to the true problem. And we're able to mitigate those events and get people the help that they need. Next slide. And then, the first panel really talked about collaboration and partnerships that Metra is involved in the UP and looking at ways to mitigate trespassing incidents or unsafe conditions along the railroad right away. And that's what it's all about. Our partnerships and collaborating with not only, obviously it's important to collaborate with the towns that we travel through. We travel through over 110 municipalities, but we work with obviously the DuPage Rail Safety Council, APTA, the Commuter Rail Coalition, and I think the FRA is another really valuable organization, as well as AAR. The FRA has I think started moving in the right direction towards trespasser prevention and grade crossing awareness. So I think that as we continue to have these these events and these sessions to talk with peer agencies and lawmakers and our partners and stakeholders, I think that we can all work together to improve and prevent additional incidents from occurring. Next slide. And that is my presentation. I appreciate, the opportunity to share our experiences, and we'll wait till the end for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilary. That was fantastic. I think a lot of these presentations are highlighting to me that this is kind of a time to start these conversations, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that, helping to answer these questions and sharing the knowledge that we're gathering. One quick bit of housekeeping before I introduce Tasha, our next guest. I think we're running a little bit slow today, or fast, whatever you want to call it, but running a little bit low on time. So some of the questions that are popping up in the chat are fantastic, and I think it might be if any of the panelists want to answer those in text, just so that we make sure that we have time to answer some of those, and then if there's time later on, we can find a way to answer it. But I don't want to shortchange the time that we do have. So Tasha, thank you so much for joining us today. I got a chance to know Tasha a couple years ago out in California, and I'm excited to have her talk about what she's been doing today. So Tasha Bartholomew is the manager of communications for Caltrain, the commuter rail agency that provides service from San Francisco to Silicon Valley. Tasha's been with the agency for 14 years and is responsible for all media and public relations, crisis communications, and special events for Caltrain. Our department also specializes in rail safety education and suicide prevention efforts for the agency. Prior to her tenure at Caltrain, Tasha was a print journalist in the Bay Area for 7 years. So with that, please take it away, Tasha.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I've been sitting here and watching everyone's presentations, and it's fantastic because, as Scott mentioned, I'm over here in the West Coast, and it's fantastic to see that whether you're here in California like myself, or New York, or Florida, or there in Illinois, we're all doing very similar work in terms of rail safety education and suicide prevention. So within my presentation, you'll probably end up seeing a lot of the stuff that you've seen in the previous presenters, but that's a good thing to me because that shows that we're pretty much all on the same page in terms of trying to get the message out there in terms of rail safety and suicide prevention. Ashley, I may need your help advancing the slide. I can't toggle it. Thank you. So just a brief overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about our rail safety education program. As Scott mentioned, I do a lot of different things for the agency, but one of the things that's probably been most important to me, and one of the reasons actually when I got hired, I wasn't necessarily the communications manager when I first got hired at the agency, 14 years ago, but I did a lot of outreach. And one of the main reasons why I got hired for the agency was to do outreach in regards to rail safety. So many of you have heard from the previous presenters about Operation Lifesaver. And so I'll talk a little bit about our program, which really mirrors what Operation Lifesaver does. And then also some of our suicide prevention initiatives that Caltrain has been really doing probably in the last a little over 10 years now, I think since 2009. Please forward. So Don't Shortcut Life. So you can forward that as well, actually. Thank you. So for those of you who are familiar with Operation Lifesaver, or even not, they focus on what are known as the 3 E's, and so do we at the agency, which is education, engineering, and enforcement. Education are the things that we do as an agency to go out and educate the public on the importance of rail safety. I should have included some really jazzy slides with myself giving presentations to pre-K, but I think you've seen in previous presentations the outreach that gets done in terms of going out, giving presentations in the community, not just with pre-K, but all grade levels and even adults, because I think probably adults need to be educated sometimes a little bit more on this, the importance of rail safety, just because, a lot of us get complacent with things. And so it's always good to give people a refresher in terms of, the do's and don'ts of what you can and can't do at around the tracks, at stations and things of that nature. Engineering are the improvements that we are constantly trying to make to improve the safety of our railroad. Probably one of the biggest projects that we have going on at Caltrain, and for those who are not familiar with Caltrain, again, we are in the San Francisco Bay Area. We run from San Francisco down to Silicon Valley, covering a little over 70 miles of rail corridor, but we are in the process of electrifying our railroad. And so that's been a huge project for us, which we started a few years back, and we hope to complete by the end of 2022. But we're constantly, again, trying to improve our railroad. Our biggest project, again, is electrification. And just in general, before we get to electrification, just doing state of good repair and things of that nature, just to make sure that our line is as safe as possible for pedestrians and people who are in vehicles. And then enforcement is our partnership that we have with the different law enforcement agencies. We partner with one of our local county sheriff's departments who provide law enforcement, enforcement for us as our transit police. And I wanted to mention that they're fantastic. It's a small law enforcement group that works as our transit police, but they are highly skilled, and a lot of them are trained or have a specialized training in QPR. And so I thought that was very interesting that, Deidre brought that up because that is something that all of our transit police officers have to go through in order to actually work on our force and to be out in the field. Next slide. So for the longest time, Caltrain's primary focus was always about rail safety, what to do, what not to do around the railroad tracks. And a lot of times when we would experience fatalities, again, whether we knew it was intentional or not, we did not speak about it. That was just kind of a no-no. We just didn't talk about it at all. But back in 2009, we had what was known as a cluster of suicides that was concentrated in an area here in the Bay Area in Palo Alto. And what made that so unique and an issue that we had to address was because these were high school students from a local high school, actually two, Gunn High School as well as Palo Alto High School. So as an agency, we went from never speaking about suicide or intentional deaths on the railroad to really having our hand forced to talk about it because it made a lot of news, and it was just something that we couldn't ignore anymore, that we couldn't just bury our heads in the sand about, talking about this very real issue. And so we really just had to change our way of thinking in terms of, yes, we do have to always promote rail safety, but we also have to talk about suicide and suicide prevention and how we can help those who may be struggling, with mental health issues or behavioral health issues before it, ends in tragedy. Next slide. So I wanted to also share some of our statistics that we have. As you can see, the numbers fluctuate from year to year. We probably, average between 13 and 15 fatalities a year. As you can see, we, based on the first column or the second column and the third column, most of our fatalities tend to be suicide. And so what I have listed here are the numbers that have actually come from the coroners where they were actually ruled a suicide or unintended. And then for 2020, so far we've had 9 fatalities, which is 9 too many, but most of those are pending. And I don't know how it works for some of you in other parts of the country, but a lot of times it can take anywhere, up to a year to get, final confirmation from the coroner or the medical examiner on a fatality, even if we know that it may have been intentional. Next slide, please. So as Scott had mentioned, prior to my tenure at Caltrain, I was a print journalist for 7 years. And, a lot of what I did in that previous job was, of course, write stories, mostly government and education, but when I first started as a reporter, I had what was called the night cops beat, which basically I listened to a police scanner, and anything that would come over of interest, I would need to follow up on. And, you know, some of those times it was a person or a vehicle that was struck by a train. Now in my job as, you know, the communications manager or PIO, you know, it's, you know, my job, and it's my job to, you know, to prevent or try to prevent as many of these headlines as I can. But because we're a commuter rail agency, and a lot of times our, you know, a lot of the fatalities that occur end up happening during the commute hour, you know, it's one of those things where it affects a lot of people. So maybe I should mention that pre-COVID, we had an average weekday ridership of 65,000 people a day. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, we try not to stay in the media for, you know, for these reasons, but again, we have to communicate with them because it affects so many people, especially, like I mentioned, a lot of times these incidents tend to occur during the commute hours. Next slide. So Scott mentioned we had worked together before, and we have. It's interesting because he said a few years ago, and I thought the same thing too, but when I look back at when we actually did the media roundtable, it was back in June of 2015, and I was like, wow, time really does fly. But we had worked very closely with Scott and the Volpe Research Center, and had him come out here to California to meet with our local media to talk to them and educate them about best practices, and, you know, how we can better, one, work together when, you know, when incidents occur, and, you know, two, how they should, or recommendations on how they should be reporting, as, you know, not to sensationalize, especially when we know or, you know, have an idea that this could have been an intentional act. So during that media roundtable, which I thought went pretty well, you know, it's hard to get print and broadcast all in the same room, but we had a number of different folks from, you know, print media, broadcast media. We also invited other public information officials from the different transit agencies. We have a lot of different transit agencies here in the Bay Area, as well as healthcare professionals. And we held a panel and Q&A, and really it was about making sure that that from my standpoint as a, you know, as a public information official, to understand their needs when reporting, which I thought I had a pretty good, you know, background on, because I used to be them. So, you know, sometimes I try to anticipate what I think they may ask. But also, you know, Scott had recommendations for best practices on, you know, how they can, you know, better cover, you know, stories when, as it relates to the rail and fatalities. And I will say that it's been pretty good and pretty successful. I mean, I think we've still, Scott, we've still kind of followed that model and try to work with, you know, continue to work with the different print and media journalists in our area. It's tough because as you probably, for those of you who are in the same field, know that there's a lot of turnover with the media. So you're constantly having to re-educate new reporters. But I think, you know, we had the blueprint, or have a blueprint. And so I think it's been working out pretty well since then. Next slide. So I'll just also talk a little bit about our suicide prevention efforts and initiatives that we've been doing over the years. So with Caltrain, as I mentioned, we cover over 70 miles of rail corridor. And so we run through 3 counties, which is San Francisco, San Mateo County, and Santa Clara County. And so we've really, in the last, you know, 10 plus years, really have built community partnerships with different suicide prevention committees within the different counties. And then we've also partnered with a group called Project Safety Net. So that is very specific to, that group is very specific to the incidents that I had mentioned from the 2009 cluster of suicides that we had in Palo Alto. The community there in Palo Alto really came together as a community and have been working since 2009 on, you know, really trying to help and and really trying to help and educate and save their kids in Palo Alto. So we have been a part of that conversation as well and been at the table with them, really trying to work as a community partner, even though we were the means, I guess, by which their kids took their lives, but we want them to know that we want to be part of the solution and not run and hide from the situations that have occurred in the past. And as a few of the previous presenters mentioned, we also have a partnership with Crisis Text Line. You can forward it, Ashley. So this is an example of our flyer that we have out there. Our number is a little bit different, but we have a unique, text bay to 741-741. That's been also a really good resource for us as well. As the previous presenters mentioned, we have a lot of millennials here in the Bay Area, and it's all about tech out here and a lot of different things. But we do realize and have realized that there are different ways that people communicate, especially the younger people, and sometimes they don't always want to talk on the phone. So just having that. Having the text number available to them is another resource. And then here, and I probably should have had this as a previous slide when I was talking. So these are numbers from our transit police. These are different from different years, showing the different the number of interventions that we've been able to have and save. I guess I don't say save people maybe, but at least save people that day who may have been thinking about harming themselves. So as you can see, the numbers are kind of similar. So again, this has to do with the specialized training that the transit police have. Next slide. And then also, I just wanted to share some of the other things that we have done. We've installed 250 suicide prevention signs at our different stations. We have a dedicated suicide prevention resource page that we're constantly updating on our website that is available to people. We have also partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Out of the Darkness walks over the years. I think we did it at least 3 different times, and we've been able to raise $25,000 for that organization. There is a local organization called MNR, and we've sponsored them as well a number of times. And then we also sponsored just last year a film festival called The Edge of Success, which was made by 2 female filmmakers who really talked about the incidents that occurred back in 2009. And so it was very well done. And interestingly enough, I wasn't sure how Caltrain was going to be made to look in the film, but actually they did a very good job. So so we've been able to do a lot of these activities over the years, and we continue to do a lot of outreach and things of that nature. Next slide. Oh, well, there we go. We're at the end of my presentation. Thank you for allowing me to share some of the things that Caltrain is doing. And I really do appreciate you all having me as part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tasha. That was fantastic. And I feel like it feels like it's been 8 years since March. So maybe not that surprising that 2015 felt like a year or two ago to me. So there we go. But thank you to all of our panelists. We don't have any time right now to answer any of the Q&A questions live, but there's been some great questions, and I thank the panelists who have already been responding to some, and I'm sure that they'll be on for a bit to continue responding. So if there's any more questions, please submit them there, and our panelists will make sure that they're taking a look to respond to things that they can respond to. But with that, I'll say one more thank you to Deidre, Victor, Hilary, and Tasha for some great presentations and insights about what we have going on. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lanny to see us through the next part of our meeting. Thank you very much.